The federal government says the remaining COVID-19 related travel measures will be done away with as of this Saturday. Now, that includes the fact that travelers will no longer need to undergo health checks for travel on air and rail or have to wear masks on planes and trains. To talk about this in a little more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, that's good news for many Canadians.
Oh, absolutely, and especially just before the snowbirds start heading south. If you're flying down, you won't have to wear a mask, though. If you want to, because of your own personal medical choices, you can. You won't have to use a can when you come back into the country. Although, if you want to use it as your customs declaration, you can. You won't have to upload all of your vaccination records and all of that. But it's interesting. Somebody pointed out to me there used to be an e-declaration app for the Canada Border Services Agency, and as this story was coming out last week, they said, look, on the App Store it says this expires September 30th. ArriveCan now optional and takes over that function on October 1st. So yeah, all of these things falling by the wayside as of October 1st. So, if you're looking at coming back at 11:59 on September 30th or just after midnight on October 1st, you know what to do. Also doing away with quarantine and isolation requirements, the mandatory random testing, all of it being dropped. The government saying, look, in the age of Omicron, it doesn't make sense anymore. But how? We can get into this more if you want. I think that they're dropping it now instead of earlier because of their political science as opposed to any medical science.
We talk about the snowbirds, but also, hey, Thanksgiving just around the corner, so really good timing for people who want to do more traveling, especially with family in the United States. Now, as much as many welcome this announcement, you have said it is coming much later than it should have, Brian. What makes you say that?
I say that because this should have been done away with months ago. I mean, it was scheduled to expire on June 30th, just ahead of Canada Day. They extended it. Now, everything but the masking requirements, by the way, is pretty much just it was part of an order in council. That's an order from the cabinet that's set to expire September 30th. They should have let this lapse in June, if not earlier, and done away with it ahead of our busy summer travel season. Instead, what's it been like for border towns? Across this country, there are towns big and small that that rely on cross-border traffic for a lot of economic activity. Even here in Toronto, and we're about a 2-hour drive, we get a lot of people coming up as tourists from the United States. They want to check out a Blue Jays game. I remember being in Ottawa. You'd run into people in Costco. Why? Because there was no Costco in the part of Western New York, just south of Ottawa. So people would drive an hour up to do that. They've been missing out on that cross-border shopping, the cross-border tourism. We've lost out on conventions, be it in cities big or small across the country, because people have said, all these extra requirements, our members don't want to do that. So they should have done away with this a long time ago. The science didn't back it up, but it was kept in place for that political science, that idea that the Trudeau government felt they had they got a boost politically from keeping this in place. And look, for people who are concerned and say, well, I'm immunocompromised or I have a loved one who is, well, you can still wear a mask. And judging by someone that uses public transit quite a bit here in Toronto, I'm on the subway all the time. It's the easiest way to get around. Masking's been optional there for months. Good number of people still use it. Most don't, but a good number do because of their own personal choice. That's what we're getting back to when it comes to international travel and inside the country travel. I think that's a good thing.
Now, Brian, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre put out a video recently taking credit for this, dropping the restrictions, putting the pressure on the feds. Do you think his position on this and his leadership win is why the Trudeau Liberals finally acted?
I don't think it's the only reason, but I think it's a factor. And if I were Pierre Poilievre, I'd be running around doing victory laps, pumping my fist in the air, going, yeah, we did this. Of course, he should be trying to take credit for it. It's politics, and he's a politician. But it is a factor. No doubt it's a factor in my mind. But there were a lot of other things going on. There was a lot of pressure from inside the Liberal caucus. At the Liberal cabinet table, there was a lot of pressure to drop this as well. In fact, I think I'm the only one that's been reporting that Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos wanted to keep all these measures in place. And when he couldn't get that, he wanted to keep masking in place until after Thanksgiving. He lost at cabinet because the Liberal cabinet said, no, we can't do this anymore. The public wants it gone. And then the third and final major factor, I think, in this are the lawsuits that are going on. There's one lawsuit that was before the courts last week, a Vancouver man and a Toronto man who are challenging the vaccination requirements that were dropped for domestic flights. And, I expected that they might have made this announcement before that case was in court, with the government trying to have it thrown out last Wednesday. So I'm surprised they waited this long, but as I said, it was a fighting cabinet. So those are the three factors: pressure inside the Liberal caucus, court cases, and Pierre Poilievre, absolutely a factor.
Now, Brian, we had a chance to hear Pierre Poilievre's leader in the House of Commons last week when QP resumed question period. He even sparred with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a little bit. What are your thoughts on Pierre Poilievre's main issues right now? And who do you think won the first of many rounds?
Well, the first 2 days, Pierre Poilievre was squaring off against the Liberal front bench. The Prime Minister wasn't there. And really, it's not overly fair to the Liberal front bench to be going up against them, because Poilievre is very good in question period and in the House of Commons. Chrystia Freeland answering questions on the fact that the Liberals are going to be raising payroll taxes and they're going to hike the carbon tax in the middle of an affordability crisis really wasn't fair, because she sounds out of touch. She sounds completely off base on this. When it came to Thursday, the Prime Minister was back in the country. Of course, he'd gone to the Queen's funeral last Monday. Then he'd gone to the United Nations for 2 days. Then he was in. First day, I'm going to say it was a draw. Some viewers may hate to hear this, but Justin Trudeau, when he's on, can be very good and effective in question period. He does well at it. So does Pierre Poilievre. And so it was interesting to see them go up against each other. Could you say either one won last Thursday? Nope, they each got out the points they needed for their respective audiences. And they're not the same audiences. But long term, I think that this issue that Poilievre is going on, that the government is going to make your life less affordable in the middle of affordability crisis,
Right.
that they're going to increase two payroll taxes, EI premiums and CP premiums on January 1st, that the carbon tax is going to go up on April 1st, hammering that message home again and again, that the government is going to make things more expensive, that this long term will resonate. And I don't think the general population will like it. So if he can break through with that message, I think it's a winning message long term for him, even if last Thursday was pretty much a draw.
Do you think we could potentially see a fall election?
Look, it's minority parliament, so it's always a possibility. And I've been saying for some time that the Liberals are looking, and if they think the winning conditions are there for them, then yeah, they'll do it. If there is a fall election, then I've long said that it would be sometime in November. Those are the dates they're looking at, because you've got Quebec is about to have their provincial election in about a week or so. Just over a week and a half from now. And then Ontario has their municipal elections, every municipality in the province. Right. That these things take up a lot of resources. You don't want to be competing for volunteers. So they'd go sometime after that. If they go at all, could be put off to the spring. But hey, when you're in government, your goal is to govern as long as possible, unless you see an opportunity to try and take that next step, get a majority again. They're definitely not in the majority territory, but do they think they could beat up Poilievre? At this point, it's not looking like they feel like that. The polls are kind of in a weird spot. Last week, there was one saying an 8-point lead for Poilievre. That's Main Street, not one of my go-to pollsters, but Leger had a 6-point lead, and their previous poll in early August, had given a 5-point lead for the Liberals. So it went from a 5-point lead for the Liberals to a 6-point lead for the Conservatives. That's still minority territory, but if I were Trudeau, I wouldn't be looking to go at this point.
So, Brian, prior to Pierre Poilievre winning the CPC leadership race, there was some controversy over a photo of him shaking hands with a man named Jeremy Mackenzie, a man that some describe as a racist and a white supremacist. At the time, Pierre Poilievre said he didn't know the guy. Now, apparently, Pierre Poilievre has issued another statement following comments that Mackenzie allegedly made about Poilievre's family. What was allegedly said?
I haven't watched the podcast at this point, but the reports I've read from my colleagues at National Post, the statement from Pierre Poilievre himself indicates that it was threats of physical and sexual violence against his wife Anna, and he went on to say that this has been passed on to the RCMP. My understanding is that Mackenzie made some very lewd and threatening comments during a podcast, and that another man on the podcast with him laughed. Remember, he calls himself the founder of Diagolon. Now, depending on who you listen to, this is either an internet joke or an attempt to form a whites only territory stretching diagonally from Alaska to Florida. They're weird dudes. However you want to describe them, they are weird dudes, and he's got some pretty awful views that he's put out there. When he took the photo with Poilievre, he knew what he was doing. He was trying to get him in trouble. He's a Maxime Bernier PPC supporter, and he posted a video afterwards saying that he did this to get Pierre Poilievre in trouble. Now he's in trouble for things he's saying. As Poilievre said, nobody should have to put up with these sorts of statements, these kind of comments, these kind of threats. Go after his policies, go after him, but don't make threats against his family. I think that's something everyone can get behind.
Now, Brian, this comes after Tory MP Garnet Jennis asked for the security credentials of a journalist who has often covered Parliament Hill to be revoked. Was there a threat?
According to Jennis, yeah, there was a threat. What happened was last week in the House of Commons, Jennis had a bit of fun by putting his follow-up question to Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland in the form of Bohemian Rhapsody, the Queen song that Justin Trudeau famously sung 2 nights before the Queen's funeral. That was in the story. Jennis used some of the words and phrases from that, tried to do a bit of the cadence, said, the Prime Minister's not a poor boy from a poor family, but he's got to show some sympathy. I thought it was clever. A lot of people thought it was funny. You get these things now and again with some characters in the House of Commons, and they've been on all sides. We've had poems and songs and different things. It livens things up. It's a bit of levity. Well, this freelance journalist named Dale Smith, he goes by Journo Dale on Twitter, very much in the Liberal camp. He's forever going after both the NDP and the Conservatives for not, just going with whatever Justin Trudeau wants. He made a comment on social media saying that this was lame, really lame. And you know what you do with a horse when it's this lame? You take it out back and you shoot it. Now, it's not a direct quote. I don't have the tweet in front of me, but it's words to that effect. Jenna said, look, I don't feel comfortable having this guy get through security because he's got a security credentials and a pass to cover Parliament. I don't feel comfortable with him if he's going around saying those sorts of things. Is it a threat? We could have a discussion about that. I can tell you that if I had said that about a Liberal MP, Hal, every single media outlet would be denouncing me, calling for the Sun to fire me. But because Dale Smith is, a very much on the Liberal side, a lot of people are giving him a pass. The Parliamentary Press Gallery, to their credit, did distance themselves from this and say that this is not acceptable. So good on the gallery for that. The Conservatives also made clear they don't want his press credentials revoked because that gets you a lot of things. They just said, we don't want him in West Block, where the House of Commons meets these days. We don't want him sitting in the gallery behind us while we're in the middle of question period. Look, at the least, Dale Smith should have apologized. He should have said I was wrong. Instead, he doubled down and he had some people, some notable people, back him up and say it was all okay. It's not okay to be saying things like that.
Sometimes I guess you can take a joke a little too far. Brian, the Conservatives let it be known over the weekend that they will vote in favor of the Liberal measures aimed at helping low-income Canadians deal with inflation. So why are they doing this, considering they've been so critical of the federal government's spending habits?
Andrew Scheer, who's taken on a leadership role in Poilievre's team, gave an interview where he said, look, this is a big part of the measure is giving people a rebate on the GST. And anytime that you can give people back some of their tax money, that's a good thing. So there's a lot of politics at play in here. I don't think that they believe that it's sound economic policy, but the government's going to do it anyway. But they want to make sure they're not on the record voting against giving people back a tax rebate or voting against helping the least fortunate. My comment on the government's affordability measures that they announced last week are that if you're at the bottom of the economic scale, you don't care that this may end up hurting in the long term, that this may contribute to inflation. And a lot of economists have said that. I happen to think that there's a good chance of that. You're just thinking, great, I'm getting some immediate relief. The bad part is that in 6 months, the government's going to withdraw these measures, and they may have made inflation worse by giving people who will spend the money as fast as they can more money in their pockets, money that they definitely need, but it'll be short term, it'll be there for 6 months, then it's gone, and inflation hasn't improved. If the government were doing this and doing something to help on their side bring down the inflationary pressures, I might be a bit more supportive of these ideas. But I can see why the Conservatives are voting for it, because otherwise it would just be, you voted against helping the least fortunate, you voted against the tax rebate. That's not something that they want on their record. And as I said, it's going to pass regardless.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.